Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. Premier Daniel Smith announced a plan to invest $1.7 billion towards continuing care here in Alberta. Alberta NDP leadership hopeful Kathleen Ganley is bringing her campaign to Lethbridge for a town hall meeting. And thousands of people are taking in the Home, Garden and Leisure Show, which continues until Saturday afternoon at the Agri-Food Hub and Trade Centre.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. A standoff continues in Calgary. Police remain posted outside of a home in Pembroke Meadows in the southeast part of the city. An armed suspect, as of broadcast time, was still barricaded inside. The incident, which is connected to a search warrant being executed, has continued for more than 12 hours. Police say when they approached the home on Penswood Way, they were fired upon by someone who was inside. Fortunately, no one was injured, but police blocked off the home and told residents to avoid the area. Some locals took shelter while others were ordered to evacuate.
Calgary Police Service is well equipped and trained to deal with these types of situations. We have a lot of professionals on this event that are working to bring this to a peaceful resolution. In order to bring it to peaceful resolution, we need the public support. As such, the shelter in place and the evacuation orders remain in effect. We know that this has had a significant impact on the community's sense of safety and has also been an inconvenience in people's day-to-day lives. We appreciate the public support in working with us to bring this to a peaceful resolution. Knowing that this event has impacted individuals, if you are in need of any kind of assistance for medical or you had travel plans or something along those lines and you need access to your residence or you're trapped in your residence, we ask that you immediately call the non-emergency line at 266-403-266-1234.
Premier Daniel Smith says the Alberta government will be investing $1.7 billion in continuing care. She says the funds will improve access to health care by reducing wait times for alternate level of care patients. Health officials say on average, 1,500 Albertans who have finished their hospital care are waiting in hospital beds until they can be moved to a continuing care space. Smith says that represents about 18% of all acute care spaces here in the province.
There are a number of patients in hospital who no longer need hospital care, but still require specialized support. These are referred to as alternative level of care patients. And what we have found is that it is taking far longer than it should to transition Albertans from a hospital to more appropriate care setting, such as continuing care or in other community support services. This came to sharp focus this past December when Minister Adriana LaGrange visited the Royal Alexandra Hospital and connected with a specialist in the ER who flagged that they had approximately 27 patients in hospital ready to be discharged, but could not be discharged because their taxes and other financial issues were not complete. As a result, these patients could not qualify for the social assistance they needed to ensure their care continued after they were discharged.
Alberta Health Services has issued a warning for parents to take precautions to prevent medication poisonings. They say last year, 1 in 3 calls to Alberta's Poison Centre was regarding children up to the age of 5. Many of the calls involved acetaminophen and ibuprofen. The AHS has tips for parents to help keep their children safe.
When giving medication, it's really important to give only the amount that's indicated on the prescription label, or when you're giving non-prescription medication, to give the medication as it is listed on the label on the bottle. Also, it's really important to follow the schedule of medication that's been indicated or in the prescription by the primary care provider. Don't use more than one medication at a time that contains acetaminophen, Tylenol, or ibuprofen, which is Advil, at the same time. And it's also extremely important to follow safe storage of medications. So this is any medications, any potential poisons in the household. Always put away medications after using them. And visitors to the house might carry medications with them. And so it's very important to keep coats and bags, purses out of the reach of children, because you don't know what's necessarily in those, and they could pose a risk to the children in the household.
The province announced more funding to better manage water resources and support the growing water infrastructure needs of municipalities. Officials say if Budget 2024 passes, close to $482 million worth of grants will go to municipal water programs over the next few years. That's an increase of almost $74 million from 2023. Transportation and Economic Corridors Minister Devin Dreeshen says the funding will really help to repair old water systems.
Now, Budget 24 actually invests more than $900 million to municipalities for water, road, transit, bridge funding every year for the next 3 years. So that's that is $2.7 billion over 3 years. Now, these historic Budget 2024 investments into municipalities for municipal water projects will promote stable growth, protect the environment, and ensure Albertans have access to clean drinking water and reliable water treatment facilities. So although these projects and this funding isn't going to go towards shiny buildings or tourist attractions, they are vitally important in Albertans' everyday life.
The Alberta government is facing questions after its proposed regulations on renewable power appear to have ignored the conclusions of its own utilities regulator. Since January, the province had a report from the Alberta Utilities Commission that says wind and solar power poses little threat to the environment or our agricultural sector. Around 4 weeks later, the UCP proposed rules for green energy that would keep wind and solar off of Alberta's best farmland and posed a 35-kilometre buffer zone around protected areas. Paul McLaughlin of Rural Municipalities Alberta says the government swung too far away from the report's recommendations, and he fears the proposals are restrictive and arbitrary. Alberta NDP leadership candidate Kathleen Ganley is holding a special town hall meeting tonight in Lethbridge. Now, the event begins at 6:30 p.m. at the Sandman Hotel. Ganley will be joined by Lethbridge West MLA Shannon Phillips. Organizers say the discussion will be centered on building an economy that works for people and a winning team ready to form government in 2027. The Alberta New Democrats will choose their new leader on June the 22nd. Well, it looks like we're in for a bit of a roller coaster ride for the next week weather-wise. First, lots of sunshine and high teen temperatures this weekend and into early part of next week. But by the middle of next week, it's an entirely different story. Jeanette Rocher is here now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, over the next 7 days, we may experience both spring and winter-like conditions.
Yeah, you know, I think the weather is teasing us right now because these last official days of winter are absolutely incredible. And then we hit our first day of spring next week, which is also beautiful. Right after that, it's like, bam, we're back into winter weather. So long story short, get outside this weekend because it is going to be lovely. We're looking at 13 degrees on Saturday with sunshine. Sunday, going to be even nicer. I'll be back later in the show to tell you just how wacky our March weather is being over the next couple of weeks.
Thanks so much, Jeanette. Lots of Southern Albertans have been taking in the Home, Garden and Leisure Show, which continues until Saturday at the Agri-Food Hub and Trade Centre here in Lethbridge. There are a number of gardening displays, plus vendors in support of our agriculture sector. Some of the guest speakers this year included Canada's baking sweetheart, Anna Olson. Now, the executive officer for Build, Bridget Mearns, says she appreciates being able to host this show at the new Agri-Food Hub and Trade Centre.
Some of the challenges and barriers that were in the old buildings, like it being sectioned off, we don't have that here. It's one big open space. Everyone can feel each other's energy. There's so much to choose from. The variety of our vendors, the variety of the shows that we're producing, it's just exciting.
Now, there's also a little friendly competition taking place involving teenagers at this year's Home, Garden and Leisure Show.
So the Who Builds It Best competition is back again for its second year at the Home, Garden and Leisure Show. And what it is it's a live building competition. It is geared towards high school students. So we have high school students from Lethbridge and area high schools. 8 different schools are being represented here. Some of the students are also involved in the dual credit program at Lethbridge College. And what they're doing is they've got 75 minutes to build an intricate tool crate. And they have no plans for that. They've got to work together as teams of 2 to be able to complete that in 75 minutes. We've got some judges from the local community that are going to judge them on creativity, originality, also the structure itself, and how well they do with those carpentry skills.
The Home, Garden and Leisure Show will wrap up this Saturday at 5 o'clock. Rising inflation has impacted the Canadian housing market so much so that young home buyers are finding it very difficult to afford a home. Jeff Reimer, real estate agent here in Lethbridge, explains what he's observed when it comes to working with his younger clients.
The ones that I'm working with, the selection is harder. So, they look and then they get discouraged when the one pops up that they can afford where they want, and it's sold right away or multiple offers. So that is a bit challenging for them, but they've also had to save up their down payment and then qualify at a certain rate. And with the interest rates having gone up, they do qualify for less. So that is a challenge so we're seeing a few more people maybe use a co-signer or buy together or pool their resources to accomplish that. And we're seeing, I saw a case here not long ago where 3 generations were involved in the purchase, the grandparent, the parents, and the kids, so that they can make it happen.
Catch the full interview with Lethbridge real estate agent Jeff Reimer and BCN's Michael Clausen coming up after business news. The Saskatchewan government has rejected an offer to go into binding arbitration as contract negotiations with teachers continue. The Saskatchewan Teachers Federation says it would have stopped all future job action if the province accepted the arbitration. The union says the province is responsible for future cancellations of school sporting events and field trips. Government officials disagree and say the union is on the hook for that. Education Minister Jeremy Cockrell says he does not want to go into binding arbitration because issues of classroom size and additional student support should not be in the collective agreement. 2 proposed bills before the Manitoba legislature aim to crack down on sex offenders. One bill would not allow those convicted of sex-related offenses from legally changing their name. It would be similar to laws already in place here in Alberta and in Saskatchewan. People who apply to change their name would have to undergo a criminal record check. Now, the second bill would expand a law that covers people who've had their intimate images shared without their consent. The law would be expanded to include images created or altered electronically, sometimes called deep fakes. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau admitted that Canadians have lost faith in governments and government institutions. He made this speech when he addressed union workers in Windsor, Ontario earlier today.
That the challenges we're facing around the world happen as people are pitted against each other, as people lose faith in their institutions, whether it be Supreme Court or unions or government institutions. And here in Canada, there is still a belief that we can do this together and we can lean on each other and our systems work for each other. We need to keep fighting for it. It didn't happen by accident, won't continue without effort. But all those advantages are part of what our pitch is on drawing investment in Canada. But all those advantages together aren't as important as the single greatest advantage Canada has. That's Canadians themselves.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, meanwhile, took his affordability message to Vancouver this week. He says the Tory plan is to offer more incentives to municipalities to build more homes.
I will require every single federally funded transit station have high-density housing approved around it. In Hong Kong, they actually allow housing over top of the transit stations so that people can live all around the station. Youth and seniors don't even need to own a car. Third, we have these 37,000 federal buildings, big, ugly, empty buildings. People are working from home, and these buildings are empty. I'm going to sell them off and turn them into housing. We'll take the proceeds of the sale and use it to pay down our debt and deficit.
Police in Israel tightened security in Jerusalem ahead of prayers for the first Friday in the Muslim holy month of Ramadan. The added restrictions took place at the IDF's military checkpoints between Jerusalem and the West Bank. It included turning back a number of Palestinians and preventing them from accessing Jerusalem's Old City. Thousands of worshippers are expected each day at Al-Aqsa Mosque during Ramadan, which ends on April the 9th. Reports are surfacing from the Middle East that the Israel Defense Forces have been arresting more Hamas terrorists, along with working to dismantle the Hamas leadership in the city of Rafah. We have more now from TBN Israel's Middle East correspondent, Yair Pinto.
We are at war, and the heroism of the warriors and the soldiers who day after day embark on complex missions and emerge victorious is clear. This is a result of the education, of the values they receive from their homes and families. We continue with patience, mostly, and determination to work hard every day to restore security to the residents of the country, to the Gaza Strip, to return the abductees, and in all other ways to complete the mission and win this war.
It was on this day that Julius Caesar was assassinated in Rome. Hollywood legends Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton marry, and My Fair Lady debuts on Broadway. This is Today in History for March the 15th.
March 15th, 44 BC. The Ides of March in ancient Rome. That's when dictator Julius Caesar is assassinated by a group of nobles that includes Brutus and Cassius. 1965, in Washington, President Lyndon Johnson urges Congress to pass an effective voting rights bill. He adopts the anthem of the civil rights movement when he tells lawmakers,
"And we shall overcome."
Months later, Johnson signs the Voting Rights Act into law, enabling blacks in the South to exercise their right to vote. 2005. In New York, former WorldCom chief Bernard Ebbers is convicted of engineering the largest corporate fraud in U.S. history. He's later sentenced to 25 years behind bars. 1964.
I said, get over there and answer that door.
All right. Whatever love wants.
Actress Elizabeth Taylor marries actor Richard Burton in Montreal, Canada. The tumultuous pair stay together for more than a decade. And 1956.
I could have danced all night. I could have danced all night.
In New York, the musical My Fair Lady, starring Rex Harrison and Julie Andrews, opens on Broadway. Today in History, March 15th. Sandy Kozel, The Associated Press.
Can I have a catchy tune? A stunning weekend is just around the corner here in southwestern Alberta. In fact, we may even come close to breaking some heat records on Sunday. A full look at the weather pictures on deck. You know, this should be an amazing weekend to have an outdoor picnic in Lethbridge, or maybe head out to Waterton for a hike around Cameron Lake. There should be loads of sunshine and temperatures in the mid to high teens. Jeanette Roche is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, we better enjoy the nice spring-like conditions right now since more snow may be on the way in the middle of next week. Welcome to southern Alberta.
Yeah, no kidding. We'll be barbecuing and picnicking this weekend and then hitting the ski slopes next weekend and possibly even the weekend after that, because as I look ahead to the 14-day trend, I'm seeing once we get past that first day of spring there on Tuesday, we're just going to be taking a nosedive from pluses to minuses, from clear skies to snow. It is going to last quite a little while, so get outside while you can this weekend. Also this weekend, St. Patrick's Day, so happy St. Paddy's Day to our Irish friends. I'm wearing green for the occasion. You probably can't tell because of our green screen, but this is mint green, this is forest green, and it looks blue on the screen. So anyways, as we get back to the weather here, 13 on Saturday, up to 18 for both Sunday and Monday, and then that beautiful first day of spring on Tuesday. High of 19 degrees, could be a record breaker. Then, like I said, we're gonna plunge into the minuses. -3 for Wednesday, -5 for a Thursday, with a chance of snow to round out that 7-day forecast. So the average high for this time of year, 6, average low -7, 18. That was our high temperature back in 1979. The chilliest on record was -29. That happened back in 1958. Sun rose this morning at 7:43. Look at that sunset at 7:38 tonight. We're almost at 12 hours. We're at 11 hours and 55 minutes exactly of daylight. 4 minutes more than we saw yesterday. Okay, beautiful one on the coast tomorrow. 17 for a high in Victoria with clear skies. A little bit cooler by the water though. 15 for a high in Vancouver. Also with sunshine, a fog dissipating in the morning. We got clear skies across Alberta tomorrow. 11 for a high in Edmonton and 15 in Calgary. As we get into the rest of the prairies, we're seeing increasing clouds in Regina with a high of 0. Partly cloudy skies in both Regina and Winnipeg tomorrow, and also windy conditions. So 3 for a high in Regina with up to 50K winds, up to 60K winds in Winnipeg with a high of -3. As we get into the central part of the country, Toronto also seeing windy conditions, 30 to 50K winds, partly cloudy skies there, 10 for a high, and in Ottawa seeing a 40% chance of early morning showers, 7 for a high, mainly cloudy skies in Montreal. 6 is the expected high tomorrow there. As we get into the Maritimes, Fredericton seeing a high of 7 degrees, 40% chance of early morning showers. Clear skies in Halifax tomorrow, 8 for a high. And Charlottetown looking at morning flurries and a risk of freezing rain, but then it's going to clear up by the afternoon. We're actually going to see the sun shine, so a mix of sun and cloud by the afternoon. 3 for a high. -1 in St. John's tomorrow, 40% chance of flurries, and warmer as you go more inland. So there you go. That is your forecast.
McDonald's system outages were reported worldwide on Thursday. The fast food chain called the problems that shuttered some restaurants for hours a technology outage and says they're being fixed, but adds the problems are not related to a cybersecurity issue. The website Down Detector also reported a spike in problems with the McDonald's app in the last few hours. Some McDonald's restaurants are working normally again, with people ordering and getting their food at locations across Canada, also in the United States, Bangkok, Milan, and in London, England. The annual pace of housing starts in February climbed 14% compared with January. Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation says the annual rate of housing starts amounted to more than 253,400 units last month, compared with roughly 223,000 in January. The annual rate of rural starts was estimated at 14,800 units. Wholesale sales rose 0.1% to $82.4 billion in January. That excludes petroleum, petroleum products, and other hydrocarbons, along with oilseed and grain. Stats Canada says the increase from December came as sales climbed in 3 of 7 subsectors, including machinery, equipment and supplies, and personal and household goods. Sales in the machinery subsector alone grew by 1.4% to $17.4 billion in January. Automakers Nissan and Honda have agreed to work together on developing electric vehicles. The rival companies say they will work on auto intelligence technology while pooling resources in a sector where both Japanese automakers have fallen behind. The chief executives appeared in a news conference in Tokyo to announce that Japan's second and third biggest automakers will look into possibilities, scope, and areas that show potential for collaboration in electrification and intelligent cars. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 19 points on the day to finish at 21,849. The Dow was down 190 points to 38,714. The S&P 500 was down 33 on the day to 5117, and the Nasdaq was down 155 points to 15,973. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down 22 cents to 81.04 U.S. per barrel. Natural gas was down 9 cents to $1.66 U.S. Gold was down $6.28 on the day to $21.55.90 U.S. an ounce, and silver was up 37 cents to $25.19 U.S. an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.16 per bushel, barley's at $6.18, canola's at $14.22, and corn is at $7.44 per bushel. Live cattle April contract was up 30 cents to $187.25. Feeder cattle were up $1.80 to $249.28, and lean hogs April contract was up $1.90 to $86.93. The Canadian dollar was down slightly over the past 24 hours to 73.84 U.S. Recapping one of our top stories, Premier Danielle Smith says the Alberta government will be investing $1.7 billion in continuing care. She says the funds will improve access to health care by reducing wait times for alternate level of care patients. Health officials say on average, 1,500 Albertans who have finished their hospital care are waiting in hospital beds until they can be moved into a continuing care space. Smith says that represents around 18% of all acute care spaces here in the province. You've heard of the expression being ghosted, right? It's when someone cuts you off completely out of their life and you simply can't contact them via phone, email, or even social media. Coming up, BCN's Naveen Day is going to chat with psychologist Dr. Greg Jans about how to deal with rejection when you've been ghosted. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to send us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also visit our website anytime to check out a number of local stories and interviews.
Here's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar. Henderson Lake Park Run invites all to throw on a pair of runners and participate in a free weekly computer-timed and recorded 5-kilometer walk, jog, or run. The park run is one of 2,100 park runs held around the world. Dogs on leashes and kids in strollers are welcome too. The park run begins at the Kinsman Picnic Shelter at 9 a.m. every Saturday. To register, visit parkrun.ca. Celebrate Recovery is a Christ-centered recovery program for any hurt, hang-up, and habit. This group meets Friday nights at Park Meadows Baptist Church. The evening begins at 7 p.m. with a large group session, followed by small groups at 8 with coffee and dessert at 9. For more information, visit celebraterecovery.ca or call Park Meadows Church office at 403-327-4422. And that's today's Bridge City News Community Calendar.
The internet and social media have forever changed our world of relationships. The good news is that we can much more easily keep in touch with people around the world and make some new friends. However, it can make it more difficult to discern who our real friends are. Today's guest joins us from Edmonds, Washington. Dr. Greg Jantz is a psychologist, best-selling author, and founder of the Center, A Place for Hope, one of the top facilities for treatment of depression in America. His latest book is Here Today, Ghosted Tomorrow, When Someone Disappears from Your Life. Dr. Jantz, great to have you back on Bridge City News.
Good to be with you today, and I didn't ghost you. I know it's a funny word, but it's something probably everybody's experienced.
You're absolutely right. We've all experienced it, and especially if you're part of the online dating world. Now, for those of you that don't know what ghosting is, Dr. Jantz, why don't you just tell us how you define ghosting, and is this a new phenomenon?
Let me just say ghosting's a funny word to describe it, but what it means is this. You thought you had a relationship with somebody, you might have thought it was going well, and all of a sudden, they disappear. They don't respond, you reach out to them, and you feel betrayal, you feel rejected, you feel a wide range of emotions, and you feel like, what's wrong with me? So that's in a dating kind of online world, but ghosting can also happen. Maybe a person had a job interview. You confirmed it, that they'd be there. And then they didn't show. They didn't say anything. They disappeared. So what we're talking about is ghosting. And yes, it's been around, but boy, with social media and the online digital world, we just have an easier way of doing it now.
Now, to what extent is it easier today to ignore people we just don't want to engage with than in times past?
Well, I can just decide, I'm done with you, and I don't respond. And then it's passive aggressive. I hold the power, and you're desperately trying. What's wrong? What did I say? What did I do? And you're trying to reconnect, but you just keep not responding. And too often, our younger generation, this has been a way of maybe handling a relationship you don't want anymore. The relationship is nearly disposable, and we haven't learned how to create a way to solve problems, to actually have a conversation with someone. It's just easier to ghost them, disappear.
Okay, so how does the rejection from ghosting affect a person's self-esteem?
Yes, ghosting will affect you. First of all, as a mental health professional and as a counselor, seeing what this has done to people, you're going to feel that betrayal can really feel deep. And the effects can be, I feel like, what's wrong with me? Did I say something wrong? Do I deserve this? And so you can easily move into kind of a victim role. And also you can be very angry, you become embittered, you go, I'll never have another relationship. And you can start doing to other people what was done to you. And so be careful about recreating patterns. You know, somewhere along the line, we've got to intervene and say, I have to forgive this person. That was about them, not about me. I'm going to release them because otherwise I keep carrying around all that pain, and it affects all my future relationships.
So I have a question for you because I've been on some dating apps and I've been ghosted before, and you're right. I do start to question myself. What was it? Something I said? Was it something that I did? But I've also been the one that's done some ghosting, I have to admit, and usually it's because I don't think the conversation is going anywhere, or I have like maybe like a few conversations going, and I see potential in others. Tell me, Dr. Jantz, is there a specific gender that has a higher chance of doing the ghosting? Because as we know in online dating, like women tend to receive a higher volume of messaging than men would.
Yes, and I'm going to make a general statement that a lot of times it may be men who are the one that is doing the ghosting.
Oh.
Now that's a general statement, but a lot of times we're not resolving issues, we're not having honest conversations, and so it's just a very injurious thing to do to another person.
Now, you list some of the warning signs that someone might ghost you. Can you just share some of those?
Yeah, one of the first things I want you to do is trust your gut, trust your discernment. Sometimes there may be some early warning signs in a relationship. You go, oh, and you start to see things, but you go, all right, but you ignore it, and then at some point they ghost you. But you probably had some warning signs, maybe how they treated you, how they maybe were late, how they didn't respect your time, maybe the things that they said, maybe they're talking a lot about a previous relationship. That could be a warning sign. So I'm going to say, listen with your heart to any potential warning signs. A person that has a lot of anger, constant irritation, and maybe even some rage, you go, you know what? No, they could be a likely candidate in their anger to just ghost, because ghosting, it really is about power and control. So just be aware. The biggest thing is this relationship being built on trust? And is it a mutual trust? And I sense and I feel that. Or am I allowing things to slide? And so when I'm ghosted, it may not be a huge surprise.
Now, you refer to ghosting as a cowardly act. Why is that?
Because you're not dealing with the truth, and you're not facing another person, and you're not problem solving. You're not talking about what's really going on. You're avoiding the real issues. If I just no longer desire to be in a relationship, that's a conversation to have, not to avoid.
And what are some tips for people that want to end communication or feel that the conversation is going nowhere and just want to wind it down rather than ghosting?
One of the we're gonna wind it down. One of the things is to have that conversation. It's a taking a deep breath and saying, I believe I need to go another direction. I'm just discovering some things about me. Don't blame the other person, but I show gratitude for the time that you've had and so forth. But I don't see this relationship going in that direction. Say those words and listen to the other person. That's always hard to receive, but it's a lot better if we can treat another person respectfully and honorably versus ignoring or ghosting them.
Do you have any advice for those who have felt the sting of rejection from ghosting?
Yes. You felt the sting, you've had an experience, and you might want to just get hurt and angry and just withdraw and isolate and say, I'll never trust another person and I'll never be in another relationship. And that means I've got to forgive. And I need to say, that was about that person, not about me. And therefore, I'm not going to carry ongoing hurt. I'm going to forgive them and whatever is going on for them, because I don't want to drag that into my next relationship. And maybe I have to say that a few times, I'm going to forgive them. Maybe I need to write down in my journal the emotions that I'm experiencing. Maybe I need to prayerfully consider just what would it take for me to really forgive. But forgiveness has to enter the picture.
Well, that's a great segue to my next question, because obviously there's hope for healing after the pain of being rejected. But what are some steps to move on? You mentioned forgiveness.
Yeah. And I don't mean that's a one-time thing. You may need to really work on that. But then I need to stay engaged in relationships. I really do. Maybe I need to join a group with other people. Maybe I need to, even at times where I'm so wounded and struggling so much, if I have a lot of anxiety and depression, then I need to maybe seek some help. What is it? Because we can't carry that anxiety, that distrust. So be sure that you're addressing whatever personal issues there may be so that you can go forward.
Now, with technology and social media, ghosting is easier than ever. Do you have any specific advice for those who have digital relationships?
Make sure it's not only digital. Have a real person, real time relationship. If you're spending 80% of your time in a digital relationship, I'm just going to challenge that's probably not a real relationship. And life is different in the digital world. Life is different in the social media. You use it to communicate, but make sure that you are with that person. And long distance relationships, that when you've never met the person, we tend to have an image and fantasize about what everything's really like. This is why so often people are just shocked. It's not what I thought it was. So I'm for real time relationships.
That's some good advice there. Plus, there's a lot of romance scams out there as well. Now, you include a section at the end of the book titled "Recovering from a Toxic Relationship." Tell us more about that, and what can a person do to recover?
Yeah, a toxic relationship is one that was probably emotionally abusive. So emotionally abusive is maybe there was passive aggressive behavior, maybe there were a lot of put downs, maybe there was constant irritability or anger, or maybe you were in an anxious relationship where you're always worried about how they were going to respond. Are they happy with you? So recovery from a toxic relationship means I need to be able to identify what is a healthy relationship. How do I build healthy intimacy? Sometimes we want to be in a relationship and we excuse certain things and we think being in an anxious relationship is normal. And I'm just going to challenge to say, no, let's learn about what is a healthy relationship, and let's begin to work on ourselves being healthy. Make sure that I'm not bringing anger, fear, guilt, and shame into a new relationship.
Now, there are some that justify ghosting as appropriate because the person that they're communicating with or their partner is being what they consider toxic. Maybe they're a narcissist, or they're displaying some sociopathic behaviors. So, are there times, perhaps maybe in a codependent relationship, where ghosting is actually appropriate?
Well, you're going to say what you're going to do. So you're going to say, this isn't working out for me. And you're going to, so I want you to know, so it's not a surprise, I'm not going to be engaging or responding to any future text or communication. I just want you to know that. Say what you're going to do. And then stay with it.
And what do you mean by digital distance makes ghosting an ever-present option?
Because there is, I'm not looking at you as a human being. I'm not seeing your reaction. And if it's digital, I can really be kind of powerful. I hold the power if I'm controlling if I'm going to respond to you or not. So it just makes it a lot easier. If you have to see that person real time every day, that's going to be a little harder. But if I can write you off in the digital world and there's distance, it's like, well, it doesn't matter.
Dr. Greg Jantz is the author of Here Today, Ghosted Tomorrow, When Someone Disappears from Your Life. Greg, thanks so much for being with us today.
Good to be with you today.
Canada continues to be in a housing crisis, with some markets experiencing a serious shortage of housing. Rising inflation has increased interest rates. Many Canadians, including young married couples, are finding it more difficult to afford a home today. To talk about this in more detail and about the housing market in Alberta is Jeff Reimer. He has been a Lethbridge realtor for 30 years with Royal LePage. Jeff, welcome back to Bridge City News.
Hey, nice to chat with you, Michael.
It's great to have you on. Now, recent headlines say overall the average price of a home of all types in Lethbridge have gone up by an astounding 21.9%. And that's over this last year. Now, apparently that is almost double the average price increase across Alberta. Could you tell us some of the factors or reasons behind this massive jump?
Sure. I mean, that statistic is a little bit hard to explain exactly, but it's really a snapshot of this January over last January's stats. So it is a marked increase, but your average house per se across the board did not go up 22% necessarily. So the statistic is what it is, but when you look at the supply and demand issues right now, essentially that's what's driving the prices up. And there's less inventory and people are still moving into Lethbridge, so that's inching the prices up. But the typical house a year ago would not be a full 22% more today necessarily. I mean, some could be close to that, but not all price ranges and not across the board.
Right. So what's a young couple or a new family coming to Lethbridge, an area, to do if they're looking to buy something? Where would you suggest that they start?
Well, I mean, definitely get in the market information early and start looking at the data. And depending on your urgency, is if you see something you like, act diligently, but act quickly. Yeah, if you wait, especially in the lower price ranges, Lethbridge's average and below, the market can be moving pretty quick if it's a good house or a good condominium or semi-detached home.
Right.
And they're moving pretty quick.
So maybe buyers don't have the luxury of location and taking their time. What do you say would be the main factor that those home purchasers are looking for?
The location is huge. Just the other day, I was working with somebody and their preference was a certain area of Lethbridge, and they did settle for a different area because the home was better, but it wasn't their top choice for location. The Lethbridge being, relatively easy to get around in and a quick drive anywhere made it at least possible for them to consider the other options to get in at the price point they needed. So,
right. Now, what about home builders? Is there a lot of new home builds going on in and around Lethbridge?
That's an interesting thing that also affects the stats because year over year, there may not have been the same amount of builders or developers putting their product on the MLS system. So that can skew the numbers as well. Like when I look back at, let's say, a semi-detached home selling for, on average, this January for $364,000, I can look back that same stat, let's say in January 2021, and say that it was $209,000. Well, that's a drop jaw number difference. But what you're going to find is in certain developments, something like a semi-detached home on the west side of a new construction, geared to a mature buyer, could easily sell for $400, $450 developed. And if that product wasn't on the MLS last year, that's quite the skewed difference. So you got to remember on scale in Lethbridge, because of our numbers, it's a snapshot only. So you really have to look at the entire trend and look at examples year over year. And, always just ask your agent for help and counsel on that. They like talking about that and giving advice. So, agents are happy to do that.
Yeah. So speaking of agents and that research, can you kind of talk about the heavy lifting that you do for your clients?
Well, every time you spend that much money, you're concerned about how much to pay, right? Whether you've done it before or it's your first time, knowing what price to offer. You look at statistics and you look at past sales in the neighborhood and try to guide them on what a fair price would be. But the past doesn't always dictate the current, right? Especially with supply and demand issues. So you can say, well, your last two neighbors sold 3 months ago for X amount. But if there's nothing on the market and they're up for it today, and there's several people looking for that home, it's not as relevant, right? So you really have to gauge your information and have the agent and the consumer discuss those nuances together candidly, and then say, okay, how urgent is your purchase? What is your budget? What is your primary needs and wants? And then weigh that against their desperation motivation of the buyer and then also of the seller. And that's also going to ring true if a seller, let's say, puts it on the market at 5% below market value to try to get, multiple offers at once. You have to know that. You have to gauge that, because if you come in at what you think last month's stats were, you're going to be SOL. So it's really important to have the buyer and agent discuss those prices, discuss the trends, look at the data, discuss it candidly, before making an offer for all purchase. That's really wise.
Right. So with this inventory being the way that it is right now, are you seeing a lot of multiple offers on properties?
More, certainly. Yeah. If you offer on a place in the first day or two, you're always nervous that there could be another one right behind you if there isn't one on the table already. And then certainly in some cases, like, if they do price it at or slightly below market, their goal may very well to be get multiple offers. And then, yeah, you're seeing.
Gotcha. I never thought of that. I guess that could be actually a listing strategy, is to price it so that you actually do get multiple offers. Now, I wanted to ask you, we've been talking about Lethbridge specifically, but are you seeing more people moving to bedroom communities like Tabor or Barnwell or Nobleford?
Absolutely. There's a trend of that. With the interest rates being a little higher, it's to get the same house per se or the same square footage. Yeah, you may not be able to get it in Lethbridge in someone's budget. So they are looking at other places, and places like, Tabor, Nobleford, Fort McLeod, they're selling quicker in those price points. And what we're finding that the prices are compacting. So when the interest rates are higher, the higher houses are, bigger payments. And so people might tend to buy a little more affordable or only qualify for less. And then sellers, when their mortgages come renew here, they're always going to consider whether they need to downsize or lower their expectations for their next house. And then with the demand of new people coming in and the shortage, then the affordable homes are getting pushed up. So you're finding that compacting of the prices. That's a real interesting phenomenon to see, but you're following it when every time you're looking at buying a house, you got to know those trends. And yeah, out of towners definitely, Lethbridge is still a short drive to any of those communities. Within an hour of here. In some big cities, they go an hour to work every day just across the city. So if someone's moving here from BC, Vancouver, Ontario, in comparison, that drive is not as drastic, and it's being considered more and more.
Right. Now, mentioning other provinces, are you seeing a lot of buyers from other provinces coming into southern Alberta?
Yeah, certainly there has been that trend in the last couple of years for sure. Buyers from British Columbia and Ontario, and when they sell a townhouse, for example, at $1 million, and they can come here and buy a really nice house for $500,000 and another revenue property or two with those same funds, it's real enticing for them to consider that. And then if they have young kids, they're going, well, our young kids aren't going to be able to buy in this environment in, let's say, Vancouver if you grew up there. And so they're considering moving to these, especially after COVID too, right? People wanted to get out of the bigger centers. So it's kind of been a trend the last few years. And Alberta, especially southern Alberta, offers really good options.
Right. And circling back to buyers' choices, are you finding that there are a lot of people maybe buying revenue properties or going into apartments or townhouses instead of a detached house?
Yeah, for sure, because the price per door is less. So, a landlord's going to look at the return on investment, and if they can get in that door for cheaper, the rents are a little higher, right, with inflation. So, as we see the rents increase, that when an owner can put their money into a bond bond market at such percent, they want to get a reasonable return on their property. So if the rents can sustain that, then yeah, they're buying those up, and it's also putting pressure on the first time market because the landlords are also looking at those. And then Lethbridge is still Lethbridge in southern Alberta, very much a retirement community because we're nice and warm here, and because we're further south. And so you're seeing retirement, we're seeing new home buyers, we're seeing landlords, investment buyers. So that's putting a lot of pressure on the lower price points, and that's also moving the prices up in those ranges.
So that being said, are you finding that maybe the number of young people buying homes has been decreasing? Are they kind of getting having too much competition then for those houses that they'd qualify for?
Yeah, the exact stat I would hard to put a finger on, but yeah, I would say so because the ones that I'm working with, the selection is harder. So they look and then they get discouraged when the one pops up that they can afford where they want, and it's sold right away or multiple offers. So that is a bit challenging for them. But they've also had to save up their down payment and then qualify at a certain rate. And with the interest rates having gone up, they do qualify for less. So that is a challenge for. So we're seeing a few more people maybe use a cosigner or buy together or pool their resources to accomplish that. And we're seeing, I saw a case here not long ago where 3 generations were involved in the purchase, the grandparent, the parents, and the kids, so that they can make it happen.
Well, that's smart. And that was actually my next question. I was going to ask if you are seeing generations coming together. And can you talk, are there some advantages? There must be advantages to that.
Yeah, and with suites, especially legal suites where you can get proper insurance and proper conformity with the safety of the city, legal suites have quite a big draw as prices go up in any community, right? So legal suites have done really well in the city because that need for more housing and for affordability and combining, maybe parents on one level, kids on the other, is becoming a little bit more common, and a legal suite does that nicely. So the premium on those has been quite rich, and if a builder has taken that step of buying a legal suite or building a legal suite, then the return on that has been reasonable, I think, because of that demand.
Yeah, that's really something to keep in mind. I know you and I have talked in the past about the need to make sure that your suite in the house you're looking at is compliant. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Maybe unpack that, why the buyer needs to pay a little bit more attention to some of those nuances.
Yeah, it's a choice of the risk tolerance of any particular buyer. Ultimate best if everything was perfect according to codes, but there's a lot of illegal suites in Lethbridge. And so much so that a lot of brokerages are requiring their agents to put the words illegal right in the advertisements. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean they're not safe, but they were probably not to code, and they may not be safe, or they may not have all the elements of safety. So, there's a lot more to it than just the zoning or the application or egress windows, right? There's alarm systems, there's the width of steps, there's proper parking, there's the actual zoning, smoke detectors, firewall, heat sources, size of windows. It's not just about being able to get out, but firemen are able to get in. So people ask, oh, do I just need to do bigger windows? Well, it's a lot more than that usually. And the city had a program before where you could take non-compliant places, if you could prove in the past that they had been rented out, and bring them into a safety minimum target with, get fire codes and such. And that program, as I understand, has ended so a few years back now. So if you're going to want to make a suite, you're going to be necessary, as I understand it, to bring it up to legal duplex standards, which could mean 2 heating sources and making sure the zoning's proper and everything.
Yeah, well, and even fire blocking. Like there's, in looking at this, you and I have talked about this before, even the liability issue of keeping your tenants safe and wanting what's best for them.
Yeah, if there's a fire, right? You want to make sure that your insurance is going to cover you, and you certainly just don't want a fire, right?
Absolutely.
They're horrible. So you want to avoid that at all costs, and that's why we have codes, right? So it is important to follow them. In a perfect world, everything would be legal. So it's something to consider, and to certainly don't hesitate to talk to the city, because they're the experts on that. And talk to a contractor, talk to your agent about it, check with the city. They can give you the information on a particular property of whether, where it's at with that, and then make your decisions based on that.
That's right. And as hard as it may be to believe for some people, the city does actually have the property owner's best interests in mind.
Yeah, for sure, right? All they want is safety. They want neighborhoods that are, attractive and aren't overcrowded. So it does come down to zoning and density and all those things too in the city's plans. And the city wants to make housing available for people. So, they'll work with homeowners as much as possible to get the best density that a neighborhood can support.
That's right. So as we wrap things up, there apparently are rumors that interest rates could be coming down. Do you have any predictions as to where the Southern Alberta real estate market is headed in 2024?
Yeah, I mean, things are steady. People are moving in. The rates, at least, are holding pattern right now. Talk of them coming down. So, yeah, I would say it's encouraging for Southern Alberta. Prices should do well and fairly stable. And Lethbridge and area has always been a very stable market. We don't react quite as drastically to the oil, but it still affects us, but less proportionately and less quickly. So yeah, it's a good time right now to own a house. It's a little more challenging to buy, but still some good opportunities, and the prices are still reasonable in relation to other communities. You look at the prices in Vancouver, Toronto, and it's just not affordable for a lot of people. So great place to live here in Lethbridge, and exciting times.
Jeff, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. Thank you for
the opportunity to discuss with you, Michael. Have a great day.
That was Jeff Reimer. He has been a Lethbridge realtor for 30 years with Royal LePage. For all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Michael Clausen. Thanks for watching.